Chapter 181. On the other hand, Alex was spending his days rather unhappily. Ever since he got beaten up at Irene Music Academy, he had no choice but to visit the hospital every now and again. Alex was in his room with a few other boys, playing poker to pass the time. But Lady Luck was not on Alex's side that day, and he had already lost quite a bit of money. Someone knocked on the door. A lady's voice came through, asking for permission to enter to change the IV bag. Alex hollered back angrily, "You could have changed the bag anytime you wanted, but you just had to change it just as the game was getting good." What great fucking timing. The door was kicked open before Alex could even finish his sentence. A group of muscular men crowded into the room. In the lead was a tall and handsome man. The man had a cunning smile, though his eyes were cold and had a dangerous glint. It was Earl Hernandez. The moment Alex laid eyes on Earl's face, he felt a tremble run through his whole body. His face was as pale as a sheet when he asked, "You? What are you doing here?" Even though Alex had never personally experienced Earl's ruthlessness, their previous conflicts and Earl's identity was more than enough to make Alex nervous. He was dumbfounded that Earl had managed to track him down. It possibly meant that not only did Earl know about the dirty work that Alex had done, it was highly likely that Caspian and his lackeys, who were standing behind Earl menacingly, knew too. Every possibility struck fear into Alex's heart. Ever since Earl took Caspian and his group under his wing, he had trained them well in the art of fighting. Under Earl's strict tutelage, Caspian and his group had become skilled in combat. Compared to how they were when they first clashed with Earl, they were much stronger now. The imposing demeanor that they gave off now was so strong that it was almost visible to the naked eye. One of Alex's followers, a boy named Charlie who didn't know any better, tried to get the upper hand on Earl. But before he could even reach Earl, Caspian delivered a swift and powerful slap to his face. Charlie spun in the air before he landed on the ground. He was knocked out cold. The other followers could only tuck their tails between their legs after seeing what fate awaited them should they try to pull the same stunt. Earl did not answer Alex's question. Instead, he pulled out two gigantic injection needles from his pocket. The tip of the needle was shockingly long, at least 2 inches in length. The tube of the needle was as wide as a tin can. Both injection needles were filled to the brim with a bright red liquid. Even the injection needles that were used on bulls weren't that large. Alex couldn't help but wonder in alarm if the needles were actually meant for elephants instead of humans. Alex looked between the impossibly large injection needle and Charlie, who was sprawled out on the floor. Stumbling over his words, Alex asked, What are you planning? Don't do anything crazy." Earl juggled the injection needles in his hand, making the liquid inside slosh around. He was all smiles as he said, "I heard that you were hospitalized recently, so I came to wish you a speedy recovery. I got some medicine just for you too." Looking at Earl's eerie smile, Alex was scared out of his wits. He could only predict 2 possible outcomes if he allowed Earl to insert the needle into his body. 1, all his blood would be sucked dry, or 2, the injected liquid would make his body explode. Don't do anything rash." Alex's face was drained of color. Earl's smile never wavered as he asked, "What's wrong? Don't tell me you're scared. You sure had the guts to give me trouble in the past, didn't you? Did your courage shrivel up now that we're face to face? Don't think you can scare me?" Alex's voice trembled as he said, "If you dare lay even a single finger on me, I guarantee you'll regret it." It was unfortunate that his threat carried no weight from how weak the delivery was. Earl continued to juggle the injection needles. Fear had taken a hold of Alex. Every muscle in his body was coiled tightly with tension. His eyes were filled with silent pleading as he asked, What do you want?" Alex's followers were also paralyzed with fear. Even though they themselves were part of a gang and have heard of the existence of such things, they've never actually seen an injection needle that was that huge. They doubted that Alex would be able to withstand it if he was injected with it. Lady Luck truly wasn't on Alex's side that day. Chapter 182. Earl's expression suddenly turned furious. "Tell me, where's Flynn? Were you the one who gave him the idea to mess with me?" Alex had planned to withhold the information that Earl wanted. "How dare you!" A deafening slap rang across the room. Alex's cheek immediately began to swell, as if stung by a bee. His resolve finally crumbled after seeing Earl move closer to him, injection needles still in hand. "That's enough. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. You're right, I was the one who put Flynn onto you." "Flynn, he's on his way to Alnewgo clubhouse to meet some friends. Please, please have mercy." "Good. Since you were so obedient and told me so quickly, I'll let you off easy this time." Earl lifted one of the injection needles and stabbed it into Alex's left butt cheek. It immediately began to swell up after the liquid was injected into his flesh. Alex howled in pain. "It hurts. It hurts so much." Caspian dragged Charlie's unconscious body closer to Earl and Alex. After a few powerful slaps from Caspian, Charlie started to groggily regain consciousness. Caspian used the remaining injection needle on him, injecting the red liquid deep into his veins. Charlie's face was pale as he asked, "What did you inject into me?" Alex's other followers looked on with pity in their eyes. Meanwhile, Alex was already feeling the effects of the drug. "Hurry. My whole body itches." The drug was scarily effective. Or it would be more accurate to say it wasn't that the drug was too effective, but that Earl had injected the pair of them with way too much of it. The amount that he injected into their bodies would have been sufficient for a bull. How could a regular human body withstand it? Alex started thrashing about on the bed. Charlie's body was heating up as well, his eyes turning red. Earl signaled for Caspian and his group to ready their recording equipment. He turned to Alex's followers and said, "If you don't want to be collateral, you'd better leave now. Once they get started, they won't be able to control themselves." The followers rushed out of the room after hearing Earl's warning. "Hurry up. I can't stand this heat anymore. Get on with it." Alex had reached his limits. Without another word, Charlie pounced on Alex. The whole room was a mess after everything was over. Earl and Caspian wore satisfied expressions as they left the hospital with their recording equipment. Alex and Charlie could only watch them leave with resentment burning in their eyes. In that moment, their life felt bleak and hopeless. They had been utterly humiliated. How would they be able to meet and face other people? At Orchard District, Flynn was driving his BMW X6 toward Alnewgo Clubhouse. He was planning to organize another banquet for Tristan Lucero from Tarthy City. Thanks to Tristan's help, Earl had fallen into a bottomless abyss with no way of returning. Flynn would use the banquet as an excuse to repay Tristan's kindness, though his real goal was to install himself as someone by Tristan's side. Just thinking about the sheer authority and power that Tristan's name held sent a giddy shiver down Flynn's spine. There weren't many people who knew what the Luceros of the internationally known Tarthy City were capable of. The Luceros were a notoriously low-profile family, to the point where they were almost an unknown entity to the general public. But being low-profile doesn't equate to being powerless. The Luceros held so much power that they could easily crush everything in their path should they wish it. Their power could even rival the authority of the heavens. Anyone who dared challenge them would be swiftly dealt with and destroyed till there was no hope of coming back. Even though there were other families in Tarthy City that commanded respect, everyone knew that the Luceros were the true kings of that city. The Luceros were like a celestial beast, staking their unchallengeable claim on Tarthy City, controlling every aspect of it as they pleased. Chapter 183. Flynn had personally seen people who were rich and powerful in their own right, even the people who were considered to be leaders, bow their heads to the Luceros. They had no choice but to forego their pride and act as if they were but mere subordinates to them. That was what true power looked like. With that sort of all-encompassing power and control, it had been as easy as breathing for Tristan to ruin Earl. Just thinking about Earl filled Flynn with so much hatred. He couldn't forget how he was humiliated by Earl on the basketball court. After that incident, Bianca never gave him her time of the day again. The shame that he felt had been difficult to bear. Now that Tristan had helped him with his revenge, Flynn thought it only right to repay his kindness by organizing a banquet in his honor. However, Flynn's journey towards Alnewgo Clubhouse was anything but smooth sailing. On his way there, he encountered several unfortunate incidents. Firstly, the roads were extremely packed and left traffic in a standstill. To make things worse, there was an accident. A young cyclist had collided with an old man. The man had fallen to the ground, shouting out in pain. The cyclist had offered several times to send the old man to a hospital. The old man refused, waving the cyclist away. Flynn's curiosity had been piqued by the scene. He parked his car on the side of the road and approached the commotion, wanting to watch the rest of the incident unfold. He was completely caught off guard when the old man suddenly grabbed his shirt and declared to the crowd that Flynn was the one who had knocked him over. Flynn stared at the old man in shock. He had just wanted to see what the fuss was about. He had no idea that he would get involved against his will. Flynn hurriedly explained that he was only a bystander and didn't know who the old man was. He told the crowd that his innocence would be proven once the CCTV footage was reviewed. However, the crowd had decided to side with the old man even when they didn't know the full story. They blamed Flynn for the accident and insisted that he was the one who ran into the old man. There were even some who suggested to dismantle Flynn's car to teach him a lesson. Flynn was caught in a scuffle with the old man when he noticed his BMW coming to life. Someone had broken into his car during the commotion, and Flynn could only watch helplessly as the thief sped away in his car. Flynn was incensed. How dare the thief steal his car in broad daylight? He took out a stack of cash and threw it at the old man. "Just you wait, you old fart, I'll deal with you later." Flynn broke away from the crowd and chased after his stolen car. Luckily for Flynn, the thief did not drive the car too far away. Flynn spotted his BMW parked at a corner on the road. Flynn picked up his pace. After realizing that the car was stopped in a dead end, he bellowed, "Motherfucker, you think you can get away with stealing my car? I'm gonna make you regret ever being born." The car door swung open. Earl exited the car, lips curved into a wide smile. The color drained out of Flynn's face after he realized it was Earl. His legs trembled and his knees nearly buckled in fear. Flynn whipped around, hoping to make a quick escape. Except, the only exit had been blocked. Caspian and his group were glaring at Flynn. "Earl Hernandez, what do you want?" Flynn asked, fear coloring his voice. "You know better than anyone else why I'm here, Flynn," Earl replied, his voice cold and unfeeling. At that moment, Flynn knew that the truth had been exposed. He kept backing away while shaking his head. "What are you saying? I don't understand." Earl began to laugh. His laughter sounded like that of the devil. "Did you know, I paid a little visit to Alex Shore earlier. Everything that you've done while hiding in the safety of the shadows. Shall I list them out one by one?" Flynn's face was contorted with fear. He knew there was no way out for him. Caspian rushed forward and landed a solid blow on Flynn, causing Flynn to fall to the ground with a loud cry. Earl stared at Flynn. His eyes were void of any mercy as he said, "You could have taken the high road and lived an easy life. But you chose to walk into hell with your own 2 feet." Flynn scrambled to his hands and knees and continued to back away from his attackers. He had seen the murderous glint in Earl's eyes and knew that his life was in danger. For the first time, Flynn regretted making an enemy out of Earl, but it was too little too late. Chapter 184. Flynn was aware that his feud with Earl had escalated into a life-or-death situation. Ever since he was beaten up by Earl at the hospital, Flynn knew that Earl truly would not show him any mercy if given the chance to end his life. "You sure are acting bold, Earl. Don't tell me you aren't afraid of being prosecuted by the law." Flynn screamed in horror as Earl swung his fist at him. Flynn squeezed his eyes closed, surrendering himself over to his inevitable fate. Just as Earl's fist was about to make contact with Flynn's face, a deafening roar reverberated around the dead end. A huge hand shot out, as quick as lightning. Miraculously, it stopped Earl's fatal blow in its tracks, saving Flynn's life. It was a strength that was unlike any Earl had encountered before. Alarmed, Earl quickly retreated a few steps. He took a good look at the newcomers. The man that had interfered was easily over 6 feet and 7 inches tall. Despite his incredible size, the man's murderous intent was nearly imperceptible. Surprise had flashed in the man's eyes, but only for a moment, before he schooled his features into a nonchalant mask. Earl knew in his heart that the man's power could not be comparable to an ordinary person's. A fire sparked in Earl's heart. He watched the man's every move closely. The man stayed in place. As if he had lost interest, he ignored Earl and instead directed his attention towards the entrance of the dead end. A group of people were approaching. The air that surrounded the group would have made any weaker-willed person's knees buckle. Some were giving off an air of elegance, some were more alluring, and of course, some were fierce and had an overwhelmingly intimidating aura. Even for someone as strong as Earl, he felt like he couldn't let his guard down. Caspian and the others stood behind Earl with grim expressions. They could tell just from the newcomers' dress and the way they carried themselves that these people were not to be messed with. Leading the group was a young man who was dressed in expensive clothes and had a coat draped over his shoulders. He was wearing a pair of sunglasses, which made him look regal and refined. But it was obvious that this man's status was above even the other newcomers. By the young man's side was a beautiful woman with captivating features. Earl immediately recognized that the woman was a famous celebrity. But the people who truly captured Earl's attention were the two well-built men flanking the young man. One of them was a little shorter compared to the man who had stopped Earl's punch earlier, though he was no less intimidating and gave off the same murderous intent. The other man was more plain in comparison. But under his demure appearance, he gave off the impression of a venomous snake that was ready to strike at a moment's notice. Earl wasn't sure what was the reason for this group of people's sudden appearance. He kept his guard up and refrained from making any reckless moves. On the other hand, Flynn was over the moon at the arrival of the newcomers. He looked at the young man at the front of the pack as if he was looking at his savior. He crawled towards the young man and grabbed his leg. "Tristan, you have to save me." The young man was Tristan Lucero in the flesh. Tristan shot Flynn a look that was full of contempt. "Useless trash. You won't die now that I'm here. Get up." Flynn got up to his feet on wobbly legs. He pointed at Earl and said, "Tristan, he's Soul. You have to take revenge for me." Tristan lifted his head and looked at Earl. "So, you're Soul." Earl met Tristan's gaze evenly. He kept his lips pressed into a hard line and stayed silent. Despite not being addressed, Flynn was too impatient to wait for his turn to speak. "This is Tristan Lucero, the scion of Sandalwood Group. His uncle is Quintis Lucero. Surely you've heard of him?" Earl's brows knitted together tightly. Although he wasn't familiar with the Sandalwood Group, he had heard of Quintis. The man was a titan in the financial world and was well known even amongst the general public. Quintis Lucero and Sandalwood Group. Both these names stirred up tumultuous waves in Earl's heart. Others might not know much about them, but Earl was different. Ever since his near-death experience, the door to his forgotten memories had been unlocked and thrown open. Memories of his past had poured out like a rushing river. Earl didn't just remember the present and the recent past. He also recalled his forgotten childhood in crystal-clear clarity. A dusty memory from Earl's past floated to the forefront of his thoughts. Chapter 185. The truth was that Jeffrey and Helena were not Earl's actual parents. Many years ago, an earthquake had separated a young Earl from his birth parents. Jeffrey and Helena had adopted him as their own and taken care of him ever since. Flynn mistakenly thought that Earl's unsettled expression was because he was afraid of Tristan. He gloated smugly, "Tristan is the scion of Sandalwood Group. He might still let you live if you get on the ground now and grovel for forgiveness. If not, well, don't blame us for not giving you a chance." Earl replied coldly, "No matter what happens, you're not leaving here alive." Frightened by Earl's boldness, Flynn retreated a few steps. Tristan moved in front of Flynn, blocking the other man from view. His eyes were like glaciers as he glared at Earl. "You dare to make that threat in front of me? I have no quarrel with you. Stay out of this," Earl replied with disinterest. Earl's response seemed to amuse Tristan. He chuckled. His smile was sardonic when he said, "I'm not leaving. I've decided that this dog of mine will live tonight and no one, not even you, can change that. Besides, we do have bad blood, you and I. Your little stint of fame on the internet. Who do you think was responsible for its downfall? It's too simple to bring you down, like taking a bottle away from a baby. So, what do you think now? Do you still think that you have no quarrel with me?" Earl's expression rapidly darkened. After some investigating, he had managed to find out that Flynn and Alex were responsible for Soul's smear campaign. However, Nothing had come up about Tristan being involved. Flynn saw the rage that burned in Earl's eyes. Wanting to add even more oil to the flame, he said, "You'd better watch that temper of yours, Earl. You can beat me up all you want, but Tristan isn't someone you can afford to mess with. If you hurt even a single strand of hair on his head, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. He'll make your and your family's lives a living hell." Earl's anger was burning white-hot at this point. Still, he was lucid enough to know that he couldn't let his anger dictate his actions. As much as he hated to admit it, Flynn was right. The Luceros were a force to be reckoned with. Even Earl wouldn't be able to withstand it if they decided to come after him. He had to act rationally, not only for his own sake, but also the sake of his family. Earl looked between Flynn's infuriatingly smug face and Tristan's cool and collected one. He committed both to memory before turning on his heel. He left the scene without sparing a single glance back at them. The dorm was empty when Earl got back. The others were attending their classes. Earl let himself stand under the spray of the cold shower until he was feeling better. When he was looking for clean clothes to put on, he came across the worn, old luggage bag that he had brought with him when first coming to university. As if recalling something, Earl opened up the luggage bag. He unzipped a small compartment and pulled out a key with an intricate design. The key had always existed in Earl's memories. Helena had always kept the key in good condition for him. It was the one item that had any value that Earl had on him when he first arrived in the Hernandez's home. It was also the only clue that Earl had to the mystery of his background. Although Jeffrey and Helena had long accepted Earl as their own son, they had understood that Earl also had the right to search for his birth parents should he want to. Staring at the key in his hand, Earl's heart was clouded over in a thick layer of fog. The truth was that even without the key as a clue, Earl already knew who his birth parents were. It was Quintis Lucero, but no matter their standing in society, Earl had decided that he would never seek them out. In Earl's eyes, they were the enemy. Meanwhile, Quintis and his wife had arrived in Alnewgo. During the summer holidays, Alnewgo would be host to a summit forum for the internet and scientific research companies. The forum would be hosted by Alnewgo's City Hall. The standards would be high. Most, if not all of Alnewgo's reputable internet technology companies would be present. Ace a rising star in the gaming sphere, it was only natural for Drakengard Games to receive an invitation to attend. The City Hall had several goals for organizing this summit. Other than providing a networking space for different enterprises to make new connections and strengthen pre-existing relationships, the main goal of the summit was to deepen the understanding of how to further advance the development of internet technology. Chapter 186. Of course, the main attraction of the summit, other than the high standards, was the attendance of the capital tycoons who were famous in both the local and international finance circles. The reputation of these capital tycoons were legendary. Once a company managed to secure a working relationship with these leaders in the finance circle, they would have their moment in the spotlight. The stock value of public listed companies would skyrocket overnight. Private companies would receive a huge sum of money, allowing them to rise to success rapidly. Quintis Lucero was undisputedly the cream of the crop amongst the capital tycoons. The power that Sandalwood Group commanded was second to none. Quintis was undoubtedly the man that everyone wanted to impress during the Internet Technology and Finance Summit. Not that any of this concerned Earl. In the following days, Earl had temporarily discarded his showdown with Flynn and Tristan to the far reaches of his mind. It seemed that the feeling was mutual, as they hadn't bothered Earl since then either. Flynn, because he was terrified of Earl. Tristan, because he only saw Earl as another insignificant small fry. He had other more important matters to attend to. For the time being, Earl had his hands full preparing for the Internet Technology and Finance Summit with Patrick. He still had to work on the storyboard of the large-scale game as well. At the same time, Earl had to make time to play basketball with Joshua and Isaac. Earl also had to keep up his training sessions with Caspian. He had seen that Caspian was the type who would take a knife for a comrade. If he honed Caspian's fighting skills, it would benefit Earl in the long run. Earl had too much on his plate, which was why he requested for time off from the campus radio station. That afternoon, there were 2 general classes in session. Earl hadn't attended class in a long time. He decided to sit in for both classes. Samuel, Isaac, and Joshua were ecstatic when they found out that Earl would be attending the classes. They asked Earl to check off their attendance for them. Even Ronnie came up with the same idea after hearing that Earl would be present in class. Earl shouldered the important task of checking off the attendance for his 4 friends as he made his way to the Marxism-Leninism elective class. Fortunately, the classroom was huge. The elderly teacher, Desmond Hansberry, conducted the class at his podium in the front while Earl sat in the last row. Earl prayed that Desmond would not take attendance. Unfortunately, after looking around and seeing the classroom that should be filled with 80 students only having around 30 students present, Desmond said, "I'll be taking the attendance before we begin." Ronnie Castro, here. Earl Hernandez. In a deep voice, Earl answered, here. Joshua Guevara. Earl pinched his nose and answered in a nasally tone, present. Isaac de la Cruz. Here, Earl replied in the roughest voice he could muster. Samuel Macarag. Earl quickly hid under the table and yelled, here. There was a girl with thick-rimmed glasses sitting next to him. She had watched Earl in awe as he pretended to be 5 different people. That was awesome. Desmond looked very satisfied, although at a glance, there looks to be only about 30 students here. Apparently all 80 students are present. I'm very pleased. All of you have great potential to succeed. All right, let's begin the lesson. Earl let out a breath of relief. It was a good thing that he was fairly talented at manipulating his voice, or his cover would have been blown. The lesson proceeded as usual. After a while, Desmond said, okay, we'll be having a discussion about the topic we just covered. I'll call on 2 students. The 2 of you will discuss amongst yourselves in front of the class. Joshua Guevara, please stand. Earl hurriedly stood up. Desmond looked at Earl with a serene smile. Next. Samuel Macarag, please discuss your thoughts with Mr. Guevara. Earl could only look around helplessly. He hoped that someone would bail him out of the sticky situation he was in. Unfortunately, everyone just looked at Earl with pity in their eyes. The jig was up. Chapter 187. Desmond invited Earl to the podium. He adjusted his glasses before asking, how did you manage to impersonate 5 different people for the attendance? Desmond then shook his head in disappointment and continued, did you truly think that I wouldn't notice? Tell me now, what is your name? My name is Isaac de la Cruz, sir, Earl answered with a straight face. Mr. de la Cruz, I'm afraid that you no longer have to attend the rest of this course. You can register for this class again next year, Desmond declared sternly. Earl quickly put on the most apologetic expression that he could muster. Mr. Hansberry, please give me another chance. I swear that I'll pay attention in class. I'll also never help another person check off their attendance again. Desmond wasn't swayed by his pleading. He insisted for Earl to leave the classroom, saying, Mr. de la Cruz, please leave now. The life of a university student was filled with all sorts of excitement and adventure. Skipping or failing a class was a common occurrence amongst the student body. It was even said that if one never failed a class, then they couldn't say that they had lived a complete university experience. Out of the goodness of his heart, Earl had decided to give Isaac a hand. He would make sure that Isaac got the full university student experience. After class, Earl headed over to the campus radio station with a spring in his step. When he arrived, he saw a beautiful girl who was staring at her own wrist in a daze. Her brows would furrow every now and again before she burst into peals of laughter. It was hard for Earl to believe that Bianca had arrived before him. Earl didn't know what Bianca was looking at. He put on a bright smile as he greeted her, "You're early today." Bianca's delicate figure jumped slightly in surprise. She quickly directed her gaze to Earl. Her eyes seemed extra bright when she looked at him, which matched the tone of her voice as she spoke. "So, you still remembered to show up. Our listeners kept saying that the quality of our show has gone down these 2 days when you weren't around." Bianca handed him a thick stack of letters. Earl flipped through them carelessly. Indeed, they were complaint letters. Their audience seemed to have gotten used to the both of them hosting the radio show together. Knowing that the radio show he hosted with Bianca was so well received, Earl couldn't help but feel pleased. Are you happy to know that you're so popular? Bianca teased, blinking her bright eyes at him. There's no such thing, Earl answered humbly. Bianca rolled her eyes charmingly at him. Now that you know you're so popular, you should hurry up and come back to host the show. Bianca's voice had always been sweet and melodious. Now that there was a touch of flirtation to her tone, it made her voice sound even more attractive. Earl was left fumbling on how to respond to Bianca's sudden flirting. He was unsure about how he should react. Bianca seemed to realize that she had overstepped. A light blush dusted over her cheeks before she hurriedly changed the subject. Since you're here, let's go ahead and start the show. All right, Earl agreed with a nod. He enjoyed working with Bianca, the two of them had a special connection. When it came to communication or teamwork, everything went smoothly with Bianca as his partner. With just a single glance, Earl would know what she was thinking. It was to the point that Earl felt like he had some sort of work romance going on with Bianca. But Earl wasn't sure what Bianca thought of him. He had always been curious, but he didn't dare to ask her. Bianca cared about him, but at times she also seemed distant. This made Earl feel that he was just one of the many friends she had. But Earl knew that he didn't just like Bianca. He had unknowingly fallen in love with her. The affection that he had for Faye in the past paled in comparison to the love that he harbored for Bianca. He loved Bianca deeply and wholeheartedly. Every time he thought about how Bianca, who seemed like an otherworldly fairy that had descended to the mortal world, would marry somebody else instead of him, Earl felt like his heart would tear apart. Earl wished to be with Bianca. He knew that he had to keep improving himself so that he would be worthy of being with her. Chapter 188. He could only continue to keep improving himself and surpass all his competitors until he could stand by her side one day. As Earl was lost in his thoughts, the end of the ensemble marked the end of another broadcast. Earl pretended to tidy up the recording studio, as he always did, while waiting for Bianca to leave first before he did. To Earl, every second spent with her was precious. Just then, Bianca suddenly called out to him, "Earl." Earl asked in confusion, "What's up?" Bianca asked somewhat casually, "What's your relationship with Belle Cole?" Earl froze for a moment. "Why are you asking this?" Bianca's face flushed slightly before she answered with a faint smile, "I saw you running with Belle on your back the other day, and guys usually aren't allowed in the female dorms. So, I got curious. Are you two dating?" Earl was at a loss for words because even he wasn't sure about his relationship with Belle. He pondered for a moment and realized he couldn't give a clear answer. Seeing that Earl didn't respond, Bianca assumed that he was admitting to it. She said gently, "Belle is quite well known in our building. She's a good person. You should cherish her." Earl realized that Bianca might have misunderstood, so he quickly explained, "You've gotten it wrong, Belle and I are just friends." Just friends. A hint of surprise flashed across Bianca's eyes before she smiled. "If you're just friends, then why are you so anxious to clarify things? You don't have to hide it. I won't tell anyone else." Earl felt a pang of bitterness. He had a feeling that Bianca didn't actually care about his relationship with Belle and was just asking casually. He wanted to explain further, but he changed his mind. Over-explaining would only create more misunderstandings. So, he smiled slightly and said, "Thanks." Bianca nodded and softly added, "Also, you should try to drink less in the future. You tend to say strange things when you're drunk. And, Belle will definitely be worried about you." Her words made Earl feel warm. But he also felt a little strange. Earl knew that although Bianca seemed indifferent on the surface, she actually cared about him. She didn't want to say it explicitly, so she had used Belle's name instead. Thinking back to how he had drunkenly asked Bianca to sing at the restaurant, he couldn't help but feel a little guilty. So, Earl said seriously, "Bianca, thank you for helping me out at the restaurant that day." Bianca simply nodded without replying. Then, she took her things and left the studio. That night, Patrick called. He was planning to head to Alnewgo University to meet up with Earl. Recently, Drakengard Games had been heavily invested in developing a large-scale online game while also needing to maintain 3 existing games, including Panzer Saga. Therefore, they were in desperate need of IT talents. It was graduation season now, and Patrick had received an invitation from Alnewgo University. So, he wanted to use this opportunity to recruit a few potential employees. Currently, Drakengard Games was developing rapidly, and the salary it offered was even better than some billion-dollar tech giants. With a great working environment, promising career prospects, and stock dividends, Drakengard Games had become a target that many fresh graduates were vying to join. Patrick had mixed feelings when he had received the invitation. He had once been expelled by Alnewgo University, but now he had returned with a different identity. As he entered the familiar campus, his state of mind had already changed drastically. Perhaps this was what they meant by what went around, came around. Chapter 189. Not long after, a sleek Maybach $600 stopped outside the building. Patrick got out of the car and smiled brightly when he saw Earl. Today, Patrick was dressed in a sharp suit and tie, exuding the confidence of a successful man. He had changed significantly since leaving Alnewgo University in disappointment back then. Earl wasn't surprised by the luxurious car Patrick was driving because Patrick had already mentioned it to him before. Although Drakengard Games was struggling financially due to a lack of funding, as the company's representative, Patrick couldn't just ride an electric scooter to and from work. Moreover, a car that matched his status was extremely important for the company's image. If the CEO's car was subpar, no one would see it as an economical measure but would rather question the company's state of operation and ability. That would in turn affect the investors' confidence in funding the company. However, this Maybach wasn't owned by the company but was rented. The daily rental fees were also a significant expense for Patrick and Earl. With Alnewgo organizing a large automobile exhibition soon, they planned to look for a car that could better represent their company. After meeting up, the two went to a clean restaurant for dinner and discussed matters regarding the upcoming Internet Technology and Finance Summit. Unlike Earl, who was more concerned about hidden capital giants like Quintis' Sandalwood Group, Patrick was more interested in a few online gaming companies, especially the Wild Goose Group that was worth trillions of dollars. He believed that Drakengard Games would be able to reach a new height if they could secure investments and platform support from Wild Goose Group. After dinner, they drove back to the campus in the Maybach. By then, night had already fallen. On the sidewalks along the main road of the campus, many graduating seniors were selling books and daily necessities. These graduates were calling out loudly to the passers-by to attract them to stop and take a look at the items. Looking at the graduates, Patrick felt a wave of nostalgia. He had once been in their shoes, working hard to make a living. But now, he had embarked on a different path. Perhaps his hardships had been blessings in disguise. The students on the sidewalks stepped aside to give way to the Maybach 600. Their eyes were filled with envy and admiration. They didn't know that the people in the car had once been just like them, lost with no direction in life, before they found their path and succeeded in the end. The next morning, Earl and Patrick drove to the sports arena to attend the on-campus career fair. The venue was crowded and lively. Those who had been invited to recruit at Alnewgo University were all the industry leaders. Aside from the students from Alnewgo University, the students from surrounding universities had also come to submit their resumes. The students' resumes were all meticulously prepared, listing academic achievements, extracurricular activities, and various awards, such as class representative roles, student union positions, outstanding student awards, and national scholarships. They were eager to showcase the most holistic and best version of themselves. Even the students who usually performed mediocrely had tried to enhance their resumes by listing down things such as getting an outstanding intern award during a summer internship along with other regular daily life achievements. The students were respectful and cautious as they stood before the formally dressed interviewers. Compared to the interviewers, the graduates seemed inexperienced and fearful. During the graduation season, some students were full of confidence, while others seemed anxious about the uncertainties of their future. As the Maybach 600 slowly pulled into a parking spot outside the sports arena, the students' attention was gradually attracted by it. Patrick's gaze suddenly locked onto something outside the car window. Following his gaze, Earl saw a group of men and women talking at the front. Among them was Patrick's ex-girlfriend, Sophie Bennett. At that moment, she was discussing with her friends about which companies to apply to next. Do you want to go say hi? Earl asked softly. Chapter 190. Patrick fell silent for a moment before finally shaking his head. That relationship was in the past, and he chose not to look back on it. Sophie also noticed the striking luxury car and wondered who was inside it. As she looked through the slightly tinted windows, she felt that the person inside the car looked familiar, but she wasn't sure. After parking somewhere far away from Sophie, Patrick and Earl entered the sports arena and sat in a corner opposite the recruitment booth of Drakengard Games. They smoked as they discussed the recruitment process. As Drakengard Games was rapidly expanding and in urgent need of employees, they didn't mind offering high salaries to attract outstanding talents. The career fair was packed with people, and Drakengard Games' recruitment booth was crowded with students who had come to submit their resumes. Drakengard Games was now at its peak. Its competitiveness was comparable to that of other major corporations, and its salary and career prospects were all rather attractive. Patrick had studied computer science in university, so he was familiar with many of the applicants. For the stronger candidates, he directly contacted the recruiters to arrange medical checkups and interviews for them. As the employment prospects nowadays weren't optimistic, the students who were directly hired were ecstatic. For ordinary people, joining Drakengard Games would undoubtedly be a huge leap in their careers. Meanwhile, the students who didn't receive an interview opportunity seemed disappointed. To their surprise, Sophie and her classmates also showed up to apply to Drakengard Games. From Sophie's expression, it seemed like she was eager to join Drakengard Games. When she inadvertently spotted Patrick in the corner, she was stunned for a second before quickly looking away. She thought he was here to apply for a job as well, but he could only stay in the coma due to the cruel fact that he had been expelled from the university. Perhaps she still had feelings for Patrick, but the reality had led them to choose different paths. When Sophie handed her resume to the recruiter, the staff member took a quick glance at the document. At that moment, the manager at the side signaled to the staff member to pause his work and hand 2 glasses of iced orange juice to Patrick and Earl. This scene left Sophie and her classmates a little stunned. Finally, one of the women asked the staff member cautiously, "Excuse me, who is that man? Is he one of your employees?" Even for a student from a prestigious institution like Alnewgo University, securing a job at Drakengard Games despite the competitive job market was undoubtedly a huge step toward success. Although the question was rather abrupt, they were eager to know why the seemingly condescending staff of Drakengard Games were so respectful toward Patrick. The staff member smiled and explained, "You might not know this, but Mr. Patrick Mendoza is actually the founder and CEO of Drakengard Games. He has personally come here because he heard that Alnewgo University has many talents." As the staff member spoke, he looked at Patrick with great admiration.